Hey everybody, Nyan here for ITP 303. So I had an urgent thing kind of come up, so I won't be able to make it to in-person lecture on Thursday, September 16th. So instead, I decided to record the lecture for lecture number 8's material, and so you don't have to come to class or join me on Zoom. You can watch this recording and then you'll be able to complete assignment number 4 and you'll be all set for this week. So yeah, I love being in person with you all, but unfortunately I have to take care of this. So it's 1:30 a.m. right now, and I'm going to hopefully, let's see, I try to wrap everything up under 2 hours. Let's go for it. Okay, so today we're going to continue talking about JavaScript. So on lecture number 7 on Tuesday, we talked about like events, traversal. We kind of just played around with events, talked a little about traversal. Lab 4 was interesting, a little bit tricky parts, but hopefully you got it all down. And then assignment 4, as I kind of showed you on Thursday, is this t-shirt customizer. It's kind of fun. You can, we're going to do a little bit more today we're going to be talking about user input. So how to work with user input like this, as they're typing, it's showing up on the shirt here. We can change the font, right? Change font size and things like that with JavaScript. So that's kind of what we're going to be doing. And we're also going to be talking about data types with JavaScript, like how to do some arithmetic to calculate the total here, and we're going to be talking about how strings kind of work here. So we're just going to kind of again just do a little more foundational topics in JavaScript, and after today's lecture you'll be able to create something like this. It's kind of fun. You don't have to write any HTML, CSS. You simply write JavaScript to kind of make all this interactivity happen. So it's a pretty fun assignment, and or at least I'd like to think so. So we're going to talk about some JavaScript numbers, strings. I don't think we're going to get to objects today. And we're also going to talk about some user input. So as usual, I hope you're So the best way to go about this, at least from what I've heard when I recorded lectures in the past, is go ahead and have this recording open on a second screen. If you happen to have like an iPad, that's even better. Put this recording on an iPad, and then on your computer, just simply follow along as you're watching this video. So just kind of follow along. And the great thing about record videos, you can pause me at any time if you need to pause me, rewind if you need to. So feel free to do all that to get the most out of today's lecture, because all the stuff you learned today, if you follow along with me, it's going to directly apply to your assignment. So and the more when it comes to learning new languages, learning new languages, the more you just do it, the more muscle memory you build, and the more you get used to it. The more errors you make, again, the more you get used to it, and the better you always get. So do follow along with me. That's the best way to get the most out of this lecture. Okay, so as usual, we're going to go ahead and go to lecture notes today, and I have some slides. I have some resources as well, as MDN, as you know, is one of my favorite resources. They have so much great reading material about, and a lot of description examples about JavaScript. So, refer to them a lot. Okay, so let's jump into today's thing. Go ahead and click on the Dropbox link. Let's go ahead and download this, and there's 2 HTML files in there. I'm going to go ahead and download this into my 12 p.m. class, and I'll be uploading all this code as well. Okay, and then I'm going to close this. Let's go ahead and open up Visual Studio Code. There's section number 8, and we're going to work with, go ahead and open up forms.html. Let's go ahead and close that, and then there we go, forms.html. Let's make our live server run, and here we go. And notice we have like a form. Okay, we put name, age, and go. Okay, we'll come back to that. Right click here and click on inspect. As always, have your console open, It's always useful whenever you're working with JavaScript. It's always useful to have your console open so that if there's any errors, you can see it right away. If you want to log out any messages, it's right here right away. Right, so console log is really, really great to have as you're working on this. Let me move this over a little bit. Okay, alrighty, and we're gonna come back to the form itself. Like, notice the form tag, and there's some new HTML tags that I've never shown you before. We'll come back to all this in a little bit. For now, we're gonna please go ahead and go to the script tag here. Go to script tag here, and we're gonna write some JavaScript in here. Alrighty, so on Tuesday we kind of left off doing some click event. We wrote some JavaScript, we wrote some click events, we did some hover events, we swapped images, we swapped Kanye around, and then we also, what else we did? We like clicked on color boxes, changed background colors, we did some traversal stuff, so we just had a lot of fun with some events. I want to show you just a couple of other JavaScript events really quickly. We're not going to go too deep into them, but I do want to show you that there are some other common events, JavaScript events out there as well, other common JS events. Let's talk about key press. Right, we're gonna do document.onKeyDown equals function, something like this. Okay, so document represents the entire DOM or the entire browser. So what this is saying is, so I'm just attaching this event, or I'm registering this event handler to the body here. So I'm just the JavaScript is going to detect anytime I press any button or any button on my keyboard, it's going to detect it. So I can let's just log something out like key down or something like that. So I'm going to save this, and then if I console.log here and then I start typing just notice how if I'm typing my keyboard right now. I don't know if you hear it. Notice how it pops up. Alright, so as you can see, just beyond on click, remember we did like on click before, you can do on key down as well. And then like not just key down, you could even like there's on key up. Okay, on key up, right? On key up. So it actually detects when I press down and press up. So I press down, right? And then eventually if I let go, there's key up, right? Key down, key up, right? Key down, key up. Right? So this is very useful when you want to make a little game, like you want to like have the, like depending on how fast they type or whatever, you can kind of see how there's all kinds of stuff you can do with key down and key up. Here's another one that's kind of similar to key down. There's also another event called key press. Okay, key press. Right, and then let me go ahead and let's go ahead and key press. Okay, key press, very similar. Like, oh my gosh, notice how we're getting all kinds of key press, key up, key down, all kinds of stuff here. Key press, key down. The only difference between key down and key press is that let's put it here. Key press doesn't work with arrow, control. Let me go ahead and wrap this. I always forget. I wish I just keep that by default. Etc. Only for like what we call typing text. So key press just works with like any of your like typical letters and numbers. But if I press like control, notice how again I'm pressing control. Oh, it's getting me something. So if I press control, notice how it says it only says key down. It doesn't say key press. So key right. I'm pressing control right now. Like alt, option, alt. So it's useful if you only want to. You don't really care if you want to ignore what the user is. Like we don't really care what the user is typing. So that's or we want to only care about what the user letters and numbers. So there's slight difference here. So those are some 3 different events I want to show you. So if you ever wanted to if you wanted to detect what the user is typing, there's these three are some options I have in my slides for today. Those are 3 options here. And there's also these form events as well, which we'll get to in a little bit, but just know that there's let's just focus on the keyboard events for now. So let's do a little bit more with this. So yeah, we can, like, that's cool. We can, detect key presses and stuff. That's great. But what's actually useful is, what did we just press, right? Did we press on the letter A? Did I press on letter number 7, right? We need to kind of like, we need to see what the heck we are typing here. So how the heck do we do that? Let me go and comment this out, so because it's kind of distracting to see, like, yeah, there we go. So key press. Okay, I'm keep pressing. All right. So I want to see what we actually pressed. To actually see what we pressed, what's going to be useful is we need to kind of get some information about what was pressed, or what event just happened. So what's very useful is, actually by default, every time I press a key, every time I press it, and this is not just only pressing, even when I click, actually, this anonymous function that runs every time I trigger this key press, this function runs, right? This anonymous function. Well, this anonymous function gets passed an interesting parameter here, this event object. It's an event object, and this event object tells us a lot about what the event that just happened. Let me go ahead and just type an event here. So every time on key press, event is triggered, it gets passed an event object that tells us okay. So if you actually do, let's go and save and then load it. Oh, interesting. Every time I press, take a look at this. This is an object, and these are its properties and values. Interesting, right? Oh, it actually tells me key S, right? There's a lot of information here. Target timestamp. Okay, cool. Like, there's a lot of interesting information here. Detail. Okay, so okay, I'm gonna press the letter A. Let's say, oh, letter A. Cool. Letter V. Oh, V, right? Oh, there's information about what I just pressed, right? So this event object, and this is not just, again, limited to key press, but mouse clicks as well. Anytime we trigger an event, we're going to get an event object back, and we're going to be able to see, like, what information, a lot more information about the event that just happened. So as you can see here, there's a property called key. This is an object, so object has properties and values. This object has a property called key and a value v. So this property here is going to tell us exactly what we just pressed. So if I simply do console.log event and then dot key, like that, dot key, because JavaScript is all dot notation. So this is the event object. This is the event object's property key here. So I'm gonna go ahead and save this, and let's go ahead and type like S here. Okay. Oh, there we go. S. Notice how, okay, I'm gonna comment that out. Cancel that again. Oh, E, F. Okay, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, whatever. Right. So notice how every time now thanks to this event object, I know exactly what the user just pressed. So this is a lot more useful than there's numbers as well. A lot more useful than simply just like key press here. So this event object, sometimes this event object will be useful in whatever you do. This event object will be useful in telling you more information about the event that literally just happened. Okay. Okay, and then now that I know what event I just, or what what I just pressed, I'm just logging out right here. I can even display whatever I just pressed onto the browser. So right now everything is just showing the console, but whatever I typed in, if I wanted to show it in the browser here, I can, like, let's take a look in here. Like, let's say I have this H1 tag over here as an ID text. Like, I can even, like, can display what user typed onto the browser. like by grabbing an element from the DOM and adding text to it. Okay, so let's grab like document.query selector. What is this? ID text. Okay, let's say I got that. Remember our inner HTML. So using inner HTML, I can get or set any kind of text or the contents of that HTML tag. So I could just be like, you know, dot inner HTML, and then set it equal to the event.key. So whatever I would just press. So if I'm going to save it right now, now if I start typing, notice how, oh, now it's showing up in real time. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z, right? There we go. So we can use, still using like inner HTML, we can still like replace the text and things. It's very very neat. And if you're wondering like, oh, how right now, like every time I type, like it's replacing it completely because I'm setting it to equal. So notice how H1 just gets it's just a new it gets replaced with whatever I just typed in. But if I wanted to append, you could do stuff like plus equal sign. JavaScript does plus equal here as well, so you could actually just kind of append, like, let's try this again, like, hello, my name is, you know, right? Dear diary, right? So you can also do that too. I mean, now if I want to do delete, if I want to delete stuff, that's a whole other matter I have to work with. Like deleting is, you know, I gotta deal with that separately, but you kind of get the gist, right? So we can, using OnKey press, you can easily detect what users are typing, and we can like display it as well. And you can even add like if else statements to say like, oh, right, like if they, you know, if they typed in the word F or something, like we can actually say like, you know, I don't know, F is not allowed, or right, like whatever we want to do. Maybe if they click on G, the character jumps, I don't know, right? Like you can use if else conditional statements to do that, right? Like it's to simplify, like blah, blah, blah. And if I type in F, it's gonna be like F is not allowed, right? So just kind of fun stuff. And then, so yeah, again, just showing you some other events out there that we're not limited to click or hover, but there's also key press in JavaScript as well. And here's another one. We're not going to go too much into this one, but I just wanted to show you this one. There's on scroll. All right, document.on scroll. Okay, document.on-scroll. Okay, and what the JavaScript can also detect how much, what or not, they can detect the moment you start scrolling. And what you can do is, depending on, so whenever you scroll, you have like a little scroll bar that comes up on the side, right? So you can actually grab the location of that scroll bar, like the offset, like how far did it scroll down. So depending on the location of your scroll bar, like how far it went down, you can change stuff on your page. So using on scroll is very neat. And again, we're not gonna go too deep into this, but I just want to show you some really neat examples out there. There's a lot of scroll. I think scroll effects are kind of making a comeback. It kind of went away for a while, but now it kind of came back. If you really want to make your website really shine, like stand out, adding kind of nifty scroll effects is really cool. You've probably seen stuff like this. Like, let's go ahead and do this, like where as I'm scrolling, like things show up, right, things fade. This is actually a library called AOS, where you can like as you're scrolling, things like kind of animate in and out, and you can flip or whatever, right? So you can kind of imagine what on scroll can do. And then I just saw this, they released a new iPad mini on last Tuesday, and I was checking out their website, and this is kind of neat. Like as I'm scrolling, so I'm scrolling right now, they're like flip the iPad, they like show the text comes up, right? Like again, they're like flipping the iPad again, like, and then all this nice gradient stuff comes up, and we again flip the iPad again, right? Like As you scroll, as I scroll again, they're using the scroll bar to calculate this. Depending on where the scroll bar is, they're like animating some. They're like making things happen. I think are these all? I wonder if these are all videos, or if they're just like GIFs or something, right? And yeah, Apple really kind of started adding these scroll effects again. They kind of stopped for. Oh, I guess it kind of stopped now, but oh yeah, as I scroll again, it keeps going. Right? Wow, they're really pushing this iPad Mini. It is a nice size. I used to have an iPad Mini when it first came out, or like the second generation or something. And then they haven't touched the iPad in a while. But it looks like they really updated it. But it's really expensive. It was like $500. It's kind of ridiculous. Oh my gosh, it's kind of ridiculous. But I don't know. Apple has their justification, I guess. But yeah, so there's another one. Here's a really I thought this was a really interesting one. So using scroll effects, using JavaScript's on scroll event, you can even create something like this. This is a company called Alfred, and they're a company in Toronto that it's a dry cleaning company, but they kind of change the way you do dry cleaning. So and instead of them like trying to explain it on their website, they created this kind of neat little scroll effect on their website to tell a story on how this is created. So let's kind of scroll down here. So they're saying, oh, we changed the way how you do dry cleaning. So you just put your clothes in a bundle like this, and then you drop it in the locker box, right? A little box, and then that's all you have to do as a customer. And then they're saying, and then behind the scenes, what happens is, you're dry cleaning. I'm just scrolling here. I'm not like clicking on anything. I'm just simply scrolling. Your dry cleaning gets sent down into this place where unicorns cry on your dry cleaning is done with unicorn tears. Again, I'm just scrolling right now. I know you can't see my hand here. But I'm just scrolling. Doing nothing crazy. There we go. It gets dried up. Oh, very nice. And then ding. Then we got some fans like going on. We got a rabbit. We got some animal labor going on. Uh-oh. Watch out for PETA, right? No. And then eventually, boom, your dry cleaning's all done. And then it's back placed in this locker now. And ta-da! That was nice. It's simple. Try it today. Right, so I thought this is one of my favorite examples. And they're using, again, this is all JavaScript using scroll effects as the user scrolls. They're just changing the graphics around. It's pretty neat. So that's done with this on scroll event, and of course there's a lot more code to it than that. And I know it's too early to think about final projects right now, but if you think these scroll effects are pretty neat, and you want to kind of implement some of these on your final project, I think it'll be really, really cool. There's also, like I mentioned, there's these libraries that kind of help you do some of these effects. If you do want to try it out, you don't have to write it completely from scratch. This is Scroll Magic. Scroll Magic is really good at making these scroll effects. Actually, that's how the Alfred was made. Alfred was made by with Scroll Magic, the library. So you can check that out too. Anyway, just wanted to show you that just because I thought it was kind of fun. Okay. So yeah, that's scroll effects for you. So or that's just you can always try this out if you wanted to. Yeah, and at this time in in-person lecture, I'd be like, any questions so far? But if you have questions about any of this that we just talked about, feel free to post on Piazza. I'd be happy to explain more if you have questions about any of that so far. So we're just playing around with some key press so far. Okay, now that we got that out of the way, I wanna let's dig into a little bit more fundamentals of JavaScript. We're gonna just quickly go over primitive data types in JavaScript, just because it might be a little bit different from what you've seen before. I want to show you, let's talk about numbers, strings specifically. Yeah. All right. So let's some here primitive data types in JS. Primitive Okay, so let's start with a number, just 7. Okay, so as I mentioned before, in JavaScript, you don't need everything's loosely typed, so you don't have to do it like int, right? You don't have to declare data types in JavaScript. And in JavaScript, there's not a differentiator between like an integer versus like a decimal point or a floating point, a double. Everything is considered a number data type, and everything is actually a floating point. Everything is actually a float underneath the hood, but we call everything is just kind of a number. So in JavaScript, you can totally just do stuff like, let's go ahead and console log stuff out. I could totally do like stuff like 7 plus like 1.1, and then it's gonna be let's show that in my console log here. It's gonna be 8.1, right? So I could totally do this. This is legal. This is legal in JavaScript. You can just add an integer and a decimal point together, and it would spit out a decimal point. Now in some languages like C++ or Java, this will throw an error because it'll be like, you can't add integers with like decimal points. It's not allowed. But in JavaScript, you can. But it does matter. Let's say like you want to add. It does matter though if where it does matter is if you can't try to add a number and like a string. So let's say you do like 1 plus like 7, but 7 is a string because it has quotes in it, right? If you try to do something like this, it's not going to throw you an error, but notice how it's gonna think you're trying to add 2 strings together, concatenate strings together. So it's gonna give you 17 instead of like 8. We'll concatenate. So watch out for that. Okay, so you can add like integers and floating points together, but if you try to add a number and a string, it's just gonna default to a string. It's not gonna throw an error. It's just gonna try to just add it. So sometimes people accidentally add different data types together and get into issues. So just watch out for that. And even the console, it kind of tells you like I don't know if you can tell on the screen here, but 8.1, notice it's blue. So if on the console log, if things are showing up as blue, it means you're working with like a number type. If it's a string, if it's kind of black like this, it's a little bit gray or a little bit gray, it means you're working with like string data types or string types. So that's kind of a nice visual indicator to see if you're working with numbers versus like a string. And let's just do some more like just do a little bit more math. So arithmetic. You can do like you can do you can subtract stuff, right? You can do like 5 times 5, multiplication. You can do like division like this, right? 1 out of 5, and it converts to a decimal point. These are all valid stuff. And notice how when I try to divide 1 divided 5, it gives me 0.2. In some languages, if you try to divide 2 integers and then you get a decimal point, it won't give you the decimal point. It'll give you like the nearest, around to the nearest integer or something like that. JavaScript is again very, very loose. It just converts everything as a float. So there's no difference between an integer versus a float. It's some people love that. Some people hate that. Right. So let me maybe put this in like in Java or C++. You know, like 1 out of 5 would equal to 0, but JS evaluates to 0.2, right? So there you go. In JavaScript, this is also a little bit weird thing that you might run into here and there. JavaScript also has a way to has 3 special floating numbers. Infinity, I know, negative infinity, and something that looks like this, nan. Short for not a number. Okay, so these are like, even though they look like strings, these are actually number types. So for example, let's say you're trying to divide like 0 divided by like high or something, which is ridiculous, right? It's interesting enough, this is not going to give you an error. Let me put some spaces between these. Trying to divide 0 divided by high is not going to give you an error. It is going to give you a NaN. There you go, not a number. Notice it's blue. This is also a number type. It's a number type in JavaScript, even though it looks like a string. So if you see NaN, it means there's something wrong with your calculation. You're trying to divide like a number with a string, or something bizarre is happening is what it means if you see that. And also if you try to divide like 1 divided by 0, you know, what is 1 divided by 0? It's in your math class you might have learned like, oh, 1 divided 0 is just undefined, or it's not possible because you can't divide 1 over 0. You can't divide anything by 0. Well, JavaScript thinks it's going to be infinity because, you know, when you divide 1 divided by 0, you're like approaching infinity. So go figure. So that infinity is just another number type as well. Again, it looks like a string, but it's not. It's actually a number type. So I just want to let you know about that, because it is, you will run into this a lot, or not a lot, but it does. It is it does come up here and there. So I just wanted to show you that. And if you did, yeah, so there's that. All right. And then you can also easily convert, like if you do need to convert like strings into numbers, or numbers to vice versa, integers to integers, numbers to string. Okay. Convert numbers, like so for example, let me just write it out first. Like, let's say you have like let number 2 let's say you have like 1,000, right? Okay, so let's say, so if I let's go ahead and do this. So right now 1,000 is a string. It's black, so you could, that kind of gives you a hint that's a string. But you can actually let's say like number 2 converted, and then you can actually convert this using there is a method called parse int, and you can just put it in that, and then if you log that out, number 2 converted, it will notice how from a string, it was a string, and now it got converted to a number. So there are times when you have a number, like for example, a user types in their age, like 12 or something, right? And but so when the user types it in, it's actually JavaScript grabs it as a string, and then if you want to convert that into a number, you can use parse int. And you can also use, there's also parse float to convert string to floating point as well. So parse integer, parse float, you can convert a string easily into a floating point or an integer. Okay, and then speaking of, while we're on the topic of math, there is a math library created into JavaScript. Okay, it's the it looks literally like this. It's just math. So for example, let's say I want to get like pi. All right, the value of pi. I type in math like this, and then this math library has a lot of properties. Math.py, for example, math.py gives us this. There you go. There's pi. And math can also, there's some methods that help us do stuff like ceiling, for example. So if I have if I want to round, these like methods are usually pretty nice. So if I do ceil, notice how it rounds up. So ceil just rounds up automatically. It yeah, right, runs up automatically to the highest. You can also do the opposite, floor. It'll round down. The floor will always round down to the lowest, even if it's 1.9. It'll round to the lowest integer rate. And then there's all integer value, and there's also math that round, which round is more like, you know, if it's 1.5 or higher, it'll be 2, as you can see here. If it's lower than 1.4, it'll round down to 1. So there's like, so this math library has a number of useful methods and properties that you can use to help you do some math as well. There's a lot more properties on math. You can read more about it if you want to. Yeah, I think I thought I'd put it here, but yeah, a lot of stuff that this math library can do as well. So that's numbers for you in a nutshell. Let's talk about some strings. Let's talk about strings. Strings. Okay. So what strings? Let's say I have, you know, like a first name string like this. Last name is Kim. Okay. Very easy to make strings. Just put quotes around it. And by the way, actually in JavaScript, you can do single quotes or double quotes. It actually doesn't matter what you decide to do. The only thing we ask, or the only thing standard that we see is if you use double quotes for your whole application. If you use single quotes, use single quotes for the whole application. It's all about the consistency rather than like what's right or wrong. It's more about consistency. Like if you're going to use single quotes, use it for, you know, all of your single quotes. So typically if you join like a typical tech company that has a large code base, they usually have like a standard saying, okay, in our code base we're gonna everything for all of our strings we're gonna use single quotes, or for all of my strings I'm gonna use double quotes. They have like a specific set standard, and you have to kind of just follow that. So same with here, like I don't have a specific standard. You can go ahead and choose what you want to follow. Just use it for all your projects. I like to use double quotes probably because that's just what I'm used to. But you know, it's kind of, I leave that up to you. So yeah, strings, like other, I think Python treats strings the same way. Strings are essentially let's put this on. Strings are a sequence of characters, or an array of characters, really. So like if I do like console.log, and then let's go ahead and log out like first name, and then square bracket, and then let's say 0. Okay, so square bracket is indices. You can use that to indices. So if I do first name square bracket 0, it grabs the 0th or the first character of my first variable, my string, which is n. Right, so there we go. We got n. There we go. I can, if I do 1, it will give me a, because that's the second one, a, right? So on and so forth. And then we've already seen there's a lot of properties and methods for the string as well. And we've seen length already. We've worked with length before already, right? In our for loops. So dot length gives us like how long my name is, 6 characters. So that's length. It's not like size, right? It's length in JavaScript. And there's also some other nifty there's also some other nifty methods as well. For example, there's like char at. Char at will tell you like which character. It's very similar to using this indices. Which character is at index number 1? Index number 1 is n, a right here. So n is 0, a is 1, so it tells me a. There we go. So that's that. And then you could also like search. Some of these are very similar to Python methods. Like you could also use index of to search for a specific letter. So maybe I want to look for my letter n. Like where I'm looking for where is the letter n in my string? Like which position? Where is it located? And if I save this and refresh, you're actually going to see 0. There we go, because yes, n is the first letter of my name. However, I also have an n at the n is also the last character of my name. So so obviously index of gives you the first match. So n that's the first one. But if you want to go backwards, you could also do last index of, and then now it'll tell me 05. It goes backwards. 05. So 5 is right here. This is the last character as well. So let me put some comments in here. Index of returns the index of where n is located. Okay, it's the very first matching one. And then there's also like fun stuff like some other methods like first name dot to uppercase. And then what it will do is it will take a look at that. It just made my name into all uppercase. So there's also lowercase as well. A lot of some fun methods with strings, very similar to Python in my opinion. Yeah. So and we're gonna be like with any web browser, just think, and because the internet has so many forms, people are typing out their information, right? Like most of the web is forms. So you're gonna be in web development, you work with so many strings, so much data, because there's all kinds of data, user information going back and forth. There's all kind of analytics going back and forth. So strings are very useful. Strings, you have to get familiar with strings really fast. So the next thing I want to show you, now that we kind of got to a little bit of understanding of strings, is forms. We love forms. In the world of web, we fill out so many forms. Right? Whenever you create an account, you log in, you search for things, you so many forms. You write reviews, write so many forms. So and JavaScript is very good at dealing with forms, and I showed you on last week how JavaScript is very good at doing user input validation as well. Like it can detect what the user is typing, and they can also detect like if they they didn't meet your password criteria, things like this. This is all JavaScript working with strings and all that fun stuff. So let's talk about forms. Like, how do we create forms like this? I know we have all kinds of forms. This is a very basic form, but I want to start with something very basic here. I'm going to scroll all the way to the top here. So I kind of already have the form code written for you just to save on a little bit of time here. So to create a form like this, you literally start with a tag called form. Okay, in HTML, everything has a tag. It's just a form tag. Notice right now we have an ID. That's kind of optional, and I have a method attribute here and an action attribute here. Now these two attributes right now is blank. We're not going to talk about this too much right now because these two attributes are more important when we actually submit this form. So so we're gonna fill out the form, but we're not gonna actually like submit the form. So if you want to actually process this form, right? Maybe I want to save the user's information, or I want to send them an email, or whatever happens after a user submits a form, that's usually the backend that has to take that comes in and takes care of all the things that what happens at that end. So we're not going to actually submit the form today. We're simply just going to kind of play around with as the user's typing something. We're going to kind of work with that. We're not so we're not going to worry about what method and action means for now. We're going to come back to this when we start talking about backend, and so that's to be continued. So yeah, we'll come back to that. Now let's look at like how we create these these boxes where we can actually type in stuff. Oh, maybe I'm gonna go and comment out our key press stuff because it's gonna get in the way a bit. So I'm gonna comment these out real quick. Am I still logging something? Yeah, let me comment this out real quick. Yeah, comment all those out real quick. All right. Okay, so let's talk about how to even create a form with HTML. So we're still notice divs are still in play. We typically like to use a div to wrap. Like if you want to do one like input per row, you can use divs to create rows. But okay, so that's kind of optional. That's more like a styling thing. But to actually create a user input like this, you typically always have like some kind of label and then the actual box where the user can like type in their info typically. So to create a label like this, there's a tag for that. It's called label, literally just label. Pretty easy, right? Label tag. And then the actual box that creates where the user can type in, this user input area here. This is created by this input tag right here, input tag. And input tag is one of those weird tags that don't have a closing, like you can't, there's no like, you can't like close the input tag. It's just because it kind of closes by itself. So you don't need, there's no closing input tag. Although the label does have a closing input tag. Okay, so and then now this input tag is the actual, again, the area that the user types in. Let's kind of break this down. So this input tag has a type attribute called text. Okay, and this type attribute is actually really important. So right now I have text in here, right? So that this allows me to type in text in here. Now I could actually change this to not just text. There's also number. Let's just say I did number, and if I made this into a number, I can only type in numbers in here. Notice how I'm typing right now, and it won't let me. I have it, but it'll only let me type in numbers. So sometimes if you want to enforce, so there's some like HTML can do some very basic input validation. It's not perfect. They can actually users can overwrite this, but like they just have like a very basic layer of validation, so you can force the user to only type in a number in here, for example. There's also, you've probably seen password before. Like right when you start typing in, like you can't actually see what the user is typing. So that's type password. So this type, again, this type, based on this type value, what you can type in here, it drastically changes. And then you could even do like, you've seen checkboxes before. By doing checkbox, you can create checkboxes. So again, still the same input tag, but just different type here. There's also, the last one is radio. Radio is like those circle ones, like it's good for like multiple choice. You can only choose one. So depending on what you type in here is what is the type of the input. So depending on what you type in this type attribute value, you can change it to, you know, whatever information you're trying to collect. So let's go. Oh, there's some new ones. You could even do like color. This is kind of neat here. Color. Oh, it's good. So you can actually click on this and like select the color even. Yeah, there's a lot of new, nice, like cool, nifty ones. Like you can color and then like, you know, like purple or something. So there's a lot of nifty ones here. You could find like a whole list of different inputs you can grab. But we're gonna stick with text for now. Okay, text. Okay, so that's type. So very important, right? Type attribute is very, very important here. And then we have an ID here right now. Okay, and notice that the ID attribute is very similar to this for attribute here, or actually it's the same thing. You have the exact same thing. This is actually important as well. So when the label tag's for attribute is the same as the ID attribute, and you can actually kind of explains it to you if you hover over it. This is another nice thing about VS Code. If you hover over it, it kind of explains what that's doing. When you make these the same, what it does is it kind of links your label, the text label, and this input together. So what I mean by that is this. Let me go ahead and save this again. And so this piece of text, the browser has no idea how this piece of text has any relations to this input box. To a browser, all it really sees is, okay, there's some text, and then there's an input box. There is no really way for them to associate them, for the browser to associate them together. The only way we can associate them together is using this for attribute here and this ID attribute here. So because they both have the same thing, now the label tag and the input tag are kind of associated together. Visually speaking, that allows us to, if I click on the label, notice how my input box just got highlighted. So that's what this, visually speaking, like this also does that as well. If I didn't have a for attribute here, and if I click on the name, like nothing happens. It doesn't, like the browser has no idea that this label tag and this user input is related. It doesn't even know. So I'm gonna like just or even if I have a typo and the name and the for and the ID is different, it's not gonna register either. But then if I save it and then there you go, Do that again. There you go. Now it associates together. Right. It like highlights the box. So also very important. Make sure you want to do that as well. There's a name attribute that just you can give it any name really. Where again, this is more important when we actually submit this information to the server side. The server is going to grab this information, and we can store it to a database. We can send an email, whatever. But we're not going to really use that attribute right now. Placeholder right here. Placeholder is literally the placeholder. At that little gray thing you see. The thing about placeholder is once I start typing it, the placeholder erases. So that's what that's what placeholder does. That's it's just there for as a very temporary text. Once I actually start typing in the box, it disappears. So that's the placeholder value. In my slides, you can actually, if you kind of go through these, there's a lot more examples. Text fields, right? It tells you what each of these are, the email, the radio buttons, how to create a radio button, how to create a checkbox, how to create a drop down. Drop down is a little bit different. You have to use the select attribute. I'm sorry, select tag. It's a little bit different. This is how you create a text area. Text area is a little bit different as well, like longer text. And then there's also buttons, right? You've got to know how to create buttons to actually submit the form. You simply do button type equals submit or reset. And then there's also how the labels work. So if you and placeholder, so run through the slides just to get make sure you have like a more detailed understanding of how the forms work. Oh, we already kind of, yeah, we'll get back to this later. All right, so that's forms in a nutshell for you. And then notice how my form tag closes all the way here. So form tag open here. Close here. It contains all of my label, input, and all that. And then right over here in line 46 has my submit button. It has a type submit, and if I click on the go button right now, it's going to try to like submit this form. But right now it's not going anywhere because it just kind of you can see it refresh. So I'm not really submitting the form anywhere because we're not going to deal with that just yet. So don't worry about it. That if it's not doing anything, it's totally fine right now. Okay. If you want to, by default, all the input tags and label tags are inline elements. Remember inline elements. So by default, if I only had label tag and input tag, they would all just kind of go in one line. They're all inline elements. So if I want to break them apart, if I want to create like some line breaks, that's why I use a div. So there's styling a form is pretty tricky, but this is just one way. So I have like a div class form row. And then I have a label, and then I have an input tag right next to it. They're next to each other. And then in the next row, I have the age and the input for age. So that's kind of how I styled it. I think I put some like width and height. You can put width and height on an input tag. You can put that padding. I added some margin. I'm using flexbox to make them go left and right. So things like that. So you could look deeper into that if you want to see how I kind of style these forms here. Oh, another thing to point out here is notice the error message. Right now I have some error message showing. I'm going to eventually actually write a real error message, but that's in a div here called like with a class error. There's two of them, div class error, div class error. Well, which we will go back to in a little bit. So yeah, if you have any questions about how to create a form, please post on Piazza, or you can visit my office hours. I know my office hours have been kind of irregular. They will get settled and more permanent soon. I'm hoping to hold them on Wednesday and Thursday. Yeah, the exact time TBD. I'm still gotta figure out some stuff. It's been a nutty semester, everybody. I don't think I have to tell you twice. I'm sure as a student too, you guys are going to like 4 or 5 different classes. Every professor has different rules about Zoom, about hybrid class, and wearing masks, and it's kind of nuts. Same for us faculty members. It's nuts. Every day there's new things happening. We're being told like we can't do this, we can't do that, and so it's just man, it's hard, guys. It's pandemic is unfortunately still not over, and we're still, we're trying to make the best we can out of it. So yeah. What was I saying? Oh yeah. So my office hours will be a little bit more finalized very soon. So you're welcome to ask me any questions about the lecture. I highly encourage asking questions about my lecture code. Okay, so we got some form set up. Great. Now let's see what's next. Let's actually kind of play around with these. Yeah, let's go ahead and play around with some of the JavaScript with this now. Just double checking my notes here, making sure I didn't skip anything. All right, cool. Yeah, so we didn't skip anything. Great. All right, now let's talk about events with forms. By the way, if I know I don't know about you guys, but for me, watching a really long lecture recording can get kind of tiresome and kind of exhausting. Even me talking not like this, it's pretty exhausting. So, if this is a great place to take a break, it's a great time. We're gonna jump into a new topic. So, if you want to take a break, go drink some water, take a nap. 20-minute naps are great. Take a coffee break, or you're welcome to do so. And then you can come, and then start. We can start the next section here. So we'll take a break. Okay, alrighty. Okay, let's talk about validating these forms. So what if the user forgot to, they don't put their name, or they didn't put their age, or they put a weird age, or they put a weird name, right? Let's talk about some validation. How do we do some user input validation? So after the user kind of types in their info, their age, and then they click on go, we're gonna check some rules here. We're gonna check some rules on these user inputs here. So whenever you're working with forms, there are 3 main events. I think I have it in my slides here. Let's kind of just backtrack here. All right. So form events: on input, on change, on submit. Whenever you're working with forms, one of these 3 events are going to be needed. So let's first talk about this form here. So let's say I want to sorry, I think I'm missing something here. Okay, yeah, no, this is good. Okay, yeah. So let's say I want to, after the user types in their info, if when I click go, I want to check their, check the input. The temptation is to just think oh, okay, so when I, so now that I'm writing JavaScript, let's okay. Actually, let's backtrack. I want to show you 3 form events. All right, 3 form events. I want to show you the first one. The first one is what I have in my slides here. Let's start with on change. Okay, on change. So on change is useful when you want to validate while the user's kind of writing stuff here. So does this have an ID? Let's look at this. Yes, this input has an ID called name-input. Okay, so let's do document.query selector. Okay, name.input. And we're going to do on change equals function. Okay. Okay. All right, so we're specifically, let's kind of zoom in here. I'm specifically zooming in on this input box here. So as I type right now, nothing's really happening. I'm just typing, blah, 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 right, on this input. And then the moment I like click out of that, oh, we see a on change event. All right, let's try that one more time. So la 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 la. Okay, and like I don't, in my console there's nothing's happening, but as soon as I kind of like click away from it, like literally so there's a change that happened on my input, we see this function get run. Okay, so on change, when this event triggers when user clicks out of the selected element. Okay, so and I only care about this one. I didn't put, so name input is exactly this input box. It's not like if I do anything here, if I do something and click out of this, like it doesn't show. Okay, I'm only zoning in on this one input here. Okay, so on change is useful. On change is also so on change is a very depending on if this is what you want to do, on change is very useful if you want to detect if the user like kind of like went out of that event or went out of that element or something like that. All right, so that's on change for you. Here's the second one. On input. Okay. Okay. On input is a lot more real time, and you've probably seen this before in your as you've been surfing the web. Okay, on input. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. All right, so I'm selecting just this one input box. I don't care about the second one, just this one. And as I type, let's take a look at this. As I type, like TOMMY, so as I literally am typing, notice how my on input event is being triggered. Right, as I'm typing, it's literally being triggered here. Okay, and then when I move out of it, now my on change, that's when the on change happens. So the key difference is just on input, on change. So again, depending on what you want, sometimes you want to track the user real time as they're literally typing. We want to do something, then you want to use this on input event. But if you just care about what if the user just kind of clicks out of it or something, then the on change event is used. So again, so these are the two different events you can use for your forms. So for your assignment 4, okay, you're going to be using on input or on change. You're not going to be using key press. Key press is for more we did key press earlier in this lecture. Key press is more for like general, like if you're trying to type some stuff in. But on input and on change, these are actual specifically for forms. And you're going to be working with forms in your assignment 4. So for your assignment 4, you're going to be using on change or on input, or the third one. Let's talk about the third one, on submit. Event triggers when an entire form is submitted. Okay, so on submit is a little bit different. So on change, this is a very, very common rookie mistake. On change and on input are specifically for an input box, like one input box here or another input box here. Now on submit is for when the entire form is submitted. So not just like one piece at a time, but the whole form is submitted. So that's like when you click on the submit button, for example. When you click on the submit button, the whole form gets submitted, right? So on submit is when the typically occurs when the user clicks on the submit button. Let me put that too. It typically occurs is clicked on. Okay, so let's try this one. So for this one, so my entire form needs to be submitted. So I'm going to look for that form tag. Where's the form tag here? Form tag. Okay, this form tag contains my entire form, and then there's my like button over there. It's my form tag. Okay, so we're gonna do document.query selector. Okay, form. All right, form ID form. Okay, on submit equals function. All right. Okay. All right. So when this form is submitted, let's go ahead and like log out something like form is submitted. Okay, console. All right, there's nothing there. All right, when I click on go, so let's just say I put like Tommy, you know, Tommy, and then Trojan or something, and then I click like go. Whoa, what just happened? Okay, like you see like a flicker kind of happening. It just kind of flickers and refreshes, right? Okay. All right. So whenever you see this happen, it's because my browser is actually trying to submit the form. It's literally trying to submit the form. But actually at this point, I don't want to actually submit the form just yet. I want to kind of like, before the form actually gets submitted to the server, what I'm trying to I simply want to validate if the name and age are entered, like if some information is entered here. So I don't want the form to actually submit yet. Right before the form actually submits, I want to like just check the name and age. So what I want to prevent the form from actually being submitted. So in JavaScript, this is very typical. What we want to do is, so let's go ahead and do this. We don't want the form to actually be submitted yet. Going to prevent the form from being submitted first to check the input validation. Okay, so we want to check, like, you know, make sure name has been filled out, make sure age has been filled out. So to prevent the form from submitting, we are going to, there's actually two ways you can do this. And the more OG way is you can actually just do return false. And then if you try to click go, notice how it does, my form doesn't refresh, it kind of just stays on the page. That's good. It says form is submitted, right? So that's like the older way, one way you can prevent the form from being submitted. This is one way, but I feel there's actually a slightly better way than this now. We have that event object, right? So every time the form is submitted, we get an event object back. The event tells us more information about what just happened. And I could event that there's a method built in called prevent default. Okay, prevent default. All right. So what prevent default does is, it's kind of what it sounds like, is the default behavior of when I click on a form and I try to submit a form, the default behavior is yes, to submit the form. That's the default behavior. Now, if I prevent the default behavior from happening, so that means I'm going to stop the form from actually submitting. So prevent default prevents the default event to occur. The default event of on submit is to submit the form. We want to prevent that. Okay, so we don't want to actually submit the form. So there we go. Let's click on go. Like go, 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 go. Right. Yay. Okay, cool. Now that and then we see every time I click on go, notice it says like form is submitted. So this form is submitting. By the way, at this point you might be wondering, oh, why do I have to use on submit? Like, why can't I just do like click? Like, can I just do like grab the button, right? Like, let's just, I'll just write out the example for here, because I do get this question a lot. Like, this button probably has a ID called go button. Okay, go button. Okay, and it's like, can't we just do this, like on click? Just click on the, right? Like, can't we just click? It's not the same thing, like whether you do, go or on submit. Okay. So the answer to this is, so kind of, yeah, you actually can do this. Could this will work somewhat. Okay. But the reason why we use on submit, instead is so that we can take advantage of, we can also capture when users use the enter button on their keyboard to submit their form. Okay. So what I'm trying to say is, so whenever users fill out a form, Tommy Trojan, yes, some people click on this button, but a lot of times people just click enter to submit the, right? They just click enter to submit the form. They don't always actually click on the button. So if you write this event handler like this, you try to submit, you add a click event to the to the button. If the user tries to submit a form by pressing on the enter button or the return button, your on click event's not going to work. Whereas on submit will capture both, whether the person clicks on the go button or clicks enter. No matter how they submit it, this event will handle all those, or capture all those events. So on submit is foolproof. Use on submit, don't use on click when it comes to forms. So literally, like I'm just telling you the answers here, right? For assignment 4, you're going to use on change, on input, or on submit, depending on what you're doing. You're not going to use key press. You're not going to use on click. You're going to use on change, on input, and on submit. So I'm literally telling you the answers here right now. And if I see a Piazza post about somebody asking or somebody using on click or key press, I'm going to assume you didn't listen to my lecture. Okay. Again, I'm literally telling the answers here. For assignment 4, you're going to be using on change, on input, or on submit. You're not going to be using on click for your forms. You're not going to be using key press or key down. Okay, now that's settled. Let's finish off this validation portion here, shall we? So we got the default, whatever. Great. So now that we got that, now we can now that we finally got that settled, let's go ahead and check if name input is empty. All right, let's check that. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is we're gonna do some steps here. The first thing I want to do is let's go ahead and grab the user's input. Okay, so let's go ahead and create like a variable. Let's call it like first name. Let's call it like first name input or something to make it very obvious. And let's grab whatever the user just typed in here. Like we need to get that piece of string in here. And so this input box has an ID called name inputs. We're gonna go grab it. Document dot query selector name pound name input. Okay, name input. All right, but name input is like the entire box. I don't really care for the entire box. I want to literally know what the user actually typed in here, right? To grab what the user actually typed in here, there's an attribute called value. Right, value is how you're gonna get the thing that's typed in by the user. It could be typed in if it's a checkbox, drop down. It's always gonna, any input tag to get the information of what the user actually typed in or clicked on or chose, selected on a drop down. It's gonna be the value attribute or value property. So we're gonna get value, and you can actually, again, console log console log is your best friend, so you can always console log stuff out if you're like unsure what just happened, or unsure what information you're working with. Here's my console again. So I'm gonna put like Tommy again, Tommy. All right, I'm gonna click go, and there we go. We got Tommy. So every time I click go, every time I try to submit the form, or I click enter, we're gonna see Tommy here. Tommy. There we go. Tommy. Console log Tommy. All right, and if you know the user like put you like George or something, clicked on go. There you go. Got George, right? Okay, so that's how you grab the information here. Here's another interesting one though. What if like the user's trying to like kind of mess with your form, and they put like spaces and like here, and they put like spaces here. If I click go right now, it's actually gonna I guess this kind of strips it out, but there's like, you know, like people sometimes put like weird spaces and stuff, and then they try to, or like they like do this, right, and then they try to submit your form, they try to break your form. To get rid of that, there's a method that helps you get rid of those extra leading and trailing spaces. There's a method called .trim, and you can literally just, as a string method, you can literally put it like this. Let's do this. .trim removes any leading or trailing white spaces. So leading and trailing meaning like any like spaces in the beginning or any spaces at the end of the user input. It's gonna like strip it out, trim it out. That's .trim. All right, all good there. All right, so we got that set up. Cool. So now that once we got all that info, now if we want to just double check if the user, if we just want to check if the user typed something in or not, we can use our if-else statement. If, right, all right, if first name input, first name input, all right. So if we want to make sure the user types at least some character in, at least one character, we can do that length, right? That length tells us how long a character is, and if it is equal to 0, okay, if the length is equal to 0, or actually it could be less than 0. I mean, it shouldn't be less than 0, but if it is, maybe we should do like less than or equal to 0, just in case there's another error or stuff that we haven't that we run into. That's when, let's go and let's lock this out. Like name is empty, right? So if I try to click, so here's my form. If I click on go, it says name input is empty, right? Okay, great. Okay, so we're gonna go into this if statement. Okay, if the length is 2, if it's not filled out, we can use length to capture that. And then we can, let's say maybe I want to show some kind of error message, right? Like some kind of error message on the side. Notice how I have I have the structure already kind of built where I have the input tag. That's the input tag, and then right next to it, its direct sibling is like this div here with the error message here. Right, so hey, I can just that seems like and then even for my age, I have a same structure. That seems like I can use my traversal thing that we learned, right? We can do okay, so I have my input, and the direct sibling is my error message. So I want to modify my error message here, right? So I can do that. I can say where is it? Where is it? Right over here. All right, document.query selector, selector. Okay, and then we got name dash input. All right, name dash input. Next element sibling. Okay. Let's change the text here instead of error. Let's change the text error message to say like name cannot be empty or something. Okay, let's go and save it, and let's just try that. Okay, name cannot be empty. Perfect. Okay, so just grab, again, I'm using the next element sibling thingy. I have my input tag, and right next to it is a div tag, so name cannot be empty. Okay, and by the way, but when I first come to this page, I should even show the error message technically, right? So maybe we should just hide the error message. Yeah, let's hide the error message. So the error message, where's my error message, has a class error. Class error, there we go. That's my CSS rule. That's why it looks red. It has italics. It has a margin. I could just say like visibility hidden. All right, hidden. Okay, so by default I hit it. Right, by default I hit it. And then back in my JavaScript, I can say right in here. Okay, let's go ahead and show the error message. So same thing. Document query selector. Not all. Name input dot next element sibling dot style. Let's just use I mean, I could use class names too, but let's just do this. Visible. And I think that's kind of it there. So right now nothing's there. If I don't put anything, I click go. We're gonna do name cannot be empty. Okay, but if I try to type something in again, Tommy, and then I click go, it's, we gotta remove this, right? So then let's put an else, so an else clause. So if the length is bigger than 0, then let's go ahead and just same code here. Instead of showing the error message, we will hide the error message to hidden. Okay, so show empty. There you go, it's gone. Right, so it's just some yeah, so some validation there. Okay, I think you got the idea. You can use if-else statements, you know, show error messages, hide error messages. So we'll, yeah, I think you got the, I won't beat the horse with this one. So now that you got some tools and got some understanding of strings and these form inputs, events, and numbers, you're now have all the resources available, all the knowledge available to do something like this. Again, these are all form. This whole thing is a form. This is all a form. You know, this is a input box. This is a drop down. This slider thingy is also an input tag as well. It's just another input tag. There's some colors that you have to choose, right? So depending on what the user does, we want to change the output here. So you're gonna have to have fun with it. I like all my assignments. This is a lot of fun. Have fun with it. Just kind of like test it. Use console log, right, to test things out. Use the form events. Okay, use on input, on change, or on submit. And then you're going to do some basic calculation. I kept it simple, very basic calculation to add the cart and to remove from cart. And I kept it simple. When you either remove from cart, you just remove all of them. It's not like you're not so every time you click add to cart, you are incrementing to the shopping cart. But when you say remove from cart, like everything gets removed, right? It just goes to 0. You don't have to decrement one by one. Kind of kept that part simple. So let's play around with it. Start early. This is, yeah, start early, start as early as you can. My advice with coding, any kind of coding, is it's so much better to do a little bit every day than try to do everything in one go, as tempting as it is. There's this idea of like shower principle, like every time you take a break, or take a shower, your brain kind of like, it's interesting, like while your brain is resting, it kind of it's still working in the background. So like after when you work on an assignment and you're kind of tired of it, you get stuck somewhere, people say like go take a shower. And then once you're in the shower, you kind of, as you're in the shower, your brain's like in this relaxed state, and it kind of connects other things in your brain, and then you kind of just you get inspired and you realize something that you're like, oh, I realized what I did wrong, and then you go and fix your code. It's yeah, it's actually a thing. Look it up, shower principle. So even if it's only like my advice is just do like a little bit of your assignment per day if you don't have a lot of time. And then every time you come back to it, your mind is more fresh. It has better ideas. So I highly recommend you start this assignment today, right after you watch this video, and then work on a little bit, and by Monday you will it's gonna look really good. So have fun with this one. So all of JavaScript is available. If you want to do a little bit more deep dive with what we've done so far, highly recommend you check out some of the resources I put in the lecture notes, more about NaN, math libraries, string methods, right? A lot of good stuff is in here. Okay, I think that's it. Yeah, oh great, I didn't have to go the full 2 hours. So that's it for today. I will see you all next Tuesday. I should be back by Tuesday, but we'll see. But yeah, I'll see you all on Tuesday. Have a great weekend and stay safe. I will see you all next week.